What is up, everybody? I am fresh off watching Moon Knight episode 5, and hands down, this is the best episode of Moon Knight so far. I've been giving my thoughts on every single episode that's come out so far, and like those previous videos, this will be spoiler heavy, so if you don't want any spoilers, please vacate the premises and then come back later afterwards. So, at the end of episode 4 of Moon Knight, Steven and Mark meet the goddess of the Underworld. Her job is to traverse everyone to the gates of the Underworld, which I thought was interesting because she has a very weird and vibrant personality amidst someone who has a job of delivering dead souls and scaling and balancing them to see if they basically go to heaven or hell. And Steven and Mark now have to balance out their scales so that they can pass through the gateway to return back to life instead of die, so that they can stop Harrow and Amit from basically destroying the world, which is pretty good. But the real bread and butter of this episode that makes it the best Moon Knight episode, and what makes me believe that this is what they wanted the show to be from the beginning, is the fact that it keeps going back and forth and jumping all around Steven and Mark's memories. We keep cutting back to this weird world where Mark and Steven are locked in a mental institution and they're being addressed by Dr. Harrow, and he's talking to them, and every time it blips back into full-blown Moon Knight and we see them doing things, communicating with each other and visiting memories, it'll cut back, and then Harrow's like, so you were going off for a while, you were telling me all of these things, and I want to know how you feel about this. And then they have to like reacclimate themselves. There's a moment at the very beginning of the episode where Mark completely loses it, and he's just like, yeah, Dr. Harrow was right. All of this stuff is ridiculous. Like, how could any of this stuff be real? And that is when this episode is fantastic. When it handles these tropes, this whole episode does this very well. It explores all of this weird fragmented mind stuff that you expect from Moon Knight, but it feels like for whatever reason they were only able to do it for this episode. Whether it be something that happened behind the scenes or something they weren't able to implement in every single episode, I don't know, but it definitely feels like this is what Moon Knight should have been as a whole show. Just if the entire series of Moon Knight was that you have Mark and Steven in this mental institution and they're talking to Dr. Harrow, but then it would cut back and you see a different version of Harrow. I think, now, granted this is a bit of a leap, but if they were going to do something like this, and since the multiverse is a thing, what they could have done is have Mark and Steven be someone whose mind is fragmented between two different realities. That whenever he snaps back into the mental institution, or the psych ward, whichever you prefer, and he's talking to Harrow, that's a different universe than the MCU, where Moon Knight is. And he's just remembering everything. He remembers everything from his own reality and everything from the MCU, which would explain in a cohesive way why he keeps jumping back and forth. Because one gripe that I do have with this episode is that those moments don't really fit in anywhere. They just kind of happen. Mark and Steven go back to this weird area where they're talking to fake Harrow, who's a doctor, and they're not Moon Knight, and they're going through and processing all of their emotions, and it's just like, why is this here? Why is this different than everything else? Because the way that the Hippo Goddess explains to them is that the reason why they envision themselves in a psych ward is because it's something that they find familiar. It's something that dead people do. Whenever they're on the boat, they envision a familiar place to comprehend the underworld. And Mark and Steven deduce that the reason why their place is a psych ward, mainly Mark, is that they're insane. They have multiple personalities, their life has been terrible, they're a very broken person, and that's why it's a psych ward, which is great. I love that. It's fantastic. I truly do love that that is the deduction and why they have that in their setting. The problem is that going to Harrow is never really fleshed out. It's just like, it's there. Like, the area itself being a psych ward with all of their memories being in each door makes sense throughout what they explain in the show, but why he keeps like snapping back to this room where he's speaking to a version of Harrow that is a psychiatrist, that doesn't make any sense. They don't really explain why that's a thing, and that's why I feel like that's what they just wanted the show to be from beginning to end. They wanted Mark and Steven to be in a psych ward where they're speaking to a professional, and then we cut back to a version of them that's out and about doing things, and then you learn either via supernatural means or via multiversal means or whatever, that like that version is its own self-contained thing apart from the superhero wing, and they just know both. Or he's just completely insane and everything he's imagining is fake. But unfortunately, because it's a cinematic universe, you can't have that. If Moon Knight was a self-contained series, they definitely could have done that and like played with it and then left an ambiguous ending of like, well, is Moon Knight real or is he crazy? I don't know. But since it's a cinematic universe, you have to be definitive, and obviously the superheroing with the gods and the magic and all that stuff, that's real, and this psych ward thing is fake, which is the only downplay of this whole episode. But anyway, moving on to more of the episode, you learn the full backstory of Mark and Steven. You see Mark as a child. His life was great at first until one day his younger brother died when the two of them went to go play out during a rainstorm. His brother drowned in a cave that they used to hang out in all the time, and after that it ruined his life. His mother became very abusive, very drunk, just a horrible person. She blamed Mark for her losing her youngest son, and in turn destroyed their relationship and destroyed Mark's life in the process, because you find out that the reason why Mark is the way that he is, why he's such a broken man, why he has multiple personalities, how he ended up becoming a mercenary, is because of his abusive mother. His mother could never get over the fact that her youngest son died, and she always blamed Mark. So she would beat him, she would ridicule him, blame him for everything, and eventually Mark reached a point where he couldn't take it anymore, and his mind fragmented and created Stephen Grant, which I will say is a little iffy because of the way Stephen acts. Is that Stephen is portrayed as a weaker version of Mark. Like, he gets hurt easily and he's very meek and mild-mannered, yet the way they describe that Stephen was created is that Stephen was created as a defense mechanism, that Mark would switch into Stephen whenever his life was too brutal for him to handle. When his mother was beating him, Stephen would come out so Mark wouldn't have to remember those things. When his mother died and he completely broke down and couldn't deal with anything, Stephen came out and started living his life so that Mark wouldn't remember the horrible trauma that he was going through. And I like that in concept, and it works to a degree because, like I said, Stephen is the meeker version of Mark. He is a version of him that isn't as strong, is smarter, but he can't take a hit. He's not as confident, and that's why I feel like this is weird. And I feel like that's probably where the third personality would have played in at some point, but neither of them know that. And I find it weird that it was like they were setting up for that. Actually, you know what? I'm jumping the gun. I'll get to the third personality when I get to the end of the episode. The end of this video. Whatever. Anyway, going back to more of them exploring their memories. So they have to explore the memories to balance out the scales. The Egyptian scales, your heart gets weighed against a feather to decide whether, if it's balanced, you go to heaven. If it's not, then you get pulled down into the sands and it's basically hell. So they have to reconcile their past and come to terms with their emotions for the scales to balance so they can leave. Now, we as an audience know that the reason why their scales can't balance is because there's three personalities, and because they don't have all three hearts on the scales, they'll never balance, which is why the scales are like going crazy at first, but then they reconcile their emotions and it slows down. But then by the end of the episode, it's just like a little teeter. It's just going back and forth like this because the third heart isn't on there. So although emotionally they've reconciled with everything, that third heart isn't there, so it's still got that little shake to it so it won't stabilize, which I thought was really cool. And seeing Mark and Steven deal with everything was fantastic. Oscar Isaac gave a beautiful performance in this episode. Personally, my favorite moment is when he completely loses it as Mark. When he doesn't want when Mark doesn't want Steven to find out that he was created as a defense mechanism from their horrible mother, because Steven has his own memories, has his own perception of reality. He believes that his family was great, that his mother was beautiful and she was very kind, because that's what Mark always wanted. Mark wanted a happy, normal life with a mother that he loved, that he could talk to every single day, and that's what Steven lives. When Mark's mother died, he broke down and he turned to Steven, and then Steven started having imaginary conversations with his mother every day. which I thought was cool. I thought that, I didn't mention any of these videos, but when I saw the first episode of Moon Knight and Steven was talking to his mother, I was like, I wonder if that person is actually real, because you never actually hear their conversation, which I thought was nice. I did find that a nice payoff of, deducing little things that happen in the show. I thought that was nice. I appreciated that. So, Steven learning everything eventually causes him to break down as well. I really like the scene that it happens in. Again, I mentioned my gripes with the whole switching between the Dr. Harrow and the real universe thing, but I really like the scene where Steven accepts that he is the second personality, that he was created and that his whole life is more or less a lie. And it's just fantastic. He's just standing there and he's looking at the phone, and at first, like, Harrow's holding the phone up for him, and he goes to pick it up and he's just like, my mom's dead. And then as he's coming to this realization, you can hear the phone dial tone. You can hear that it's just a blank dial tone, that there isn't anyone on that side of the phone, and that hit hard, at least for me, because I really did love that. It was just fantastic. Now, getting towards the very end of the episode, Steven and Mark, they reconcile all of their emotions. They're outside and they're like, all right, great, we did it, so can we go? And the hippo goddess is like, I'm sorry guys, you weren't able to balance your scales. If you can't make it through the door, you're gonna get pulled down into the Jahat, I think is what they called it. And Steven and Mark, they're trying to fight off all of the zombies that are trying to pull Mark and Steven into the sand, and everything's going well. Mark's fighting back, but he's getting a little beat up, so Steven jumps in and he's fighting them off, and it's like, okay, good, they're doing this, they've got it down. And then, unfortunately, Steven ends up falling into the Jihad. He tackles one of the mummies to get them off of Mark, and the boat keeps sailing, and Steven gets turned into a statue and dies. And I was not expecting that, if I'm being honest. I wasn't expecting Steven to die, but it makes perfect sense why he did have to die. Because, as I mentioned earlier, they don't know that they have a third personality, so their scales never would have balanced, so they would have all been pulled into the Jihad. However, because Steven died, as soon as he was pulled into the Jihad and turned into stone, the scales balanced. Because Mark no longer has three personalities, he just has two, and there were two hearts on the scales, which balanced out, and now he can pass back into the realm of the living. That was clever writing. I do like that. I do not like that this third personality is still hidden. I understand that he can't have been shown for this ending that I like to have happened, but also I feel like there could have been like an extra minute or two where this third personality, now the second personality, because R.I.P. Steven, would have shown up, but I feel like that's going to be something that happens at the end of the final episode. That's my prediction for the season finale of Moon Knight, is that Mark's going to come back. He's just going to be Mark Spector. He's going to have Moon Knight powers again. He's going to beat the hell out of everybody. And he's going to defeat Harrow and Amit and save the world and free Khonshu, and everything's going to be fine and dandy. And then the last scene of the show, Mark is gonna look into the mirror, and there's gonna be a disheveled version of himself, and he's gonna be like, hello Mark, and then it's probably gonna end there. That's gonna be the cliffhanger that's gonna set up for Moon Knight's appearance later in the MCU, or Moon Knight season 2. Mark is going to realize that he has another personality in there that he doesn't remember and doesn't know why was created, and just exists. That's my prediction. I could be wrong, but that's my prediction about how Moon Knight is going to end as a whole. But yeah, that was Moon Knight episode 5. This episode was really strong, best episode of the season. I really wish the entire series of Moon Knight was like this episode, but beggars can't be choosers, so I will take this one episode and rewatch it as many times as I feel like. So that is going to be the end of this thoughts video on Moon Knight. I will be returning next week to talk about the season finale, and I am very eager and excited to see what happens in this season finale. So with that being said, I'm the innocent villain, and remember folks, stay innocent until proven villainous, and I will catch you in the next one.